So, our lesson is David disobeys God, and they skip something really important. And I did not want to skip the important thing, so you're going to get it anyway. You're going to like this one. So I'm going to tag this one onto the front of David disobeys God. So we're picking up in 2 Samuel, and it's not chapter 11. I just didn't correct it. It says it's going to say chapter 11, but it's not. It's chapter 9. It's just because I was trying to tag it on in a hurry. All right, so now David said, "Is there still anyone who is left in the house of Saul, that I may show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now, if y'all remember when we talked about David and Jonathan, they made a covenant. All right, it was a covenant with God that nothing's going to be between their houses ever. They're always going to watch out for each other. Jonathan is gone, but he's got a son that's left. And so this is part of David keeping his covenant. He says, "And there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba. So when they had called him to David, the king said to him, 'Are you Ziba?' He said, 'At your service.' Then the king said, 'Is there not still someone of the house of Saul to whom I may show the kindness of who? God.'" Because God had blessed David. He gave David the throne, the people, all of that. And Jonathan is gone. He was the rightful heir to the throne in the human, patriarchal system, but not in God's system. But if you remember, he gave David his clothes and everything. He wanted David to be king because God wanted David to be king. And Ziba said to the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan who was lame in his feet." And if you remember, we read this a few weeks back, and it talks about this boy when there was an attack on the city. His nurse got him up, they fell, and he became lame. He could not walk. That's the one that's left. All right, so the king said to him, "Where is he?" And Ziba said to the king, "Indeed, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, in Lodabar." We usually read right over that, but I want to point out this word, Lodabar, because names mean something in the Bible. If you look up that word, it means no pasture or no word. He doesn't have a pasture. He doesn't have an inheritance. He doesn't have the word. Then the king sent for him and brought him out of the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, from Lodabar. Now when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, had come to David, he fell on his face and prostrated himself. Then David said, "Mephibosheth," and he answered, "Here is your servant." All right, he was humble. He referred to himself as servant, but I want you to get that he fell on his face. This is not, a bow like we would see in the movies. He literally got down on his face. And I want you to think of how hard that was. He couldn't use his legs. He's lame. He can't even walk. And somehow he's got to get down on his face and give obedience to the king. So David said to him, let me back up, sorry. I want to tell you what Mephibosheth means, because I told you what Lodabar means. No. Isn't that an odd name? The house of shame. Now I want you to think about that, because I'm going to come back to it. So David said to him, "Do not fear, for I will surely show you kindness for Jonathan your father's sake. And I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat bread at my table continually." He goes from a place of no pasture. His name is one of shame, and yet he's invited to the king's table. Does that sound familiar? This is one of those physical accounts of the spiritual truth, because we are Mephibosheth. We have no pasture. We have no word, right? We come from sin and shame. And does the king not invite us all to his table? And there's no expiration date on this. He says, you're going to eat at my table continually. To eat at the king's table, your family. Isn't that what God does for us? Right? Then he bowed himself and said, what is your servant that you should look upon such a dead dog as I? This is a man, he's lame. There's no way that he can manage, I guess you would say, like the lands or whatnot. He can't go to war like the kings. He can't do any of those things. He probably has to have somebody help take care of him and get him from place to place. And yet he's respectful, he's humble, and he doesn't look at himself as any kind of prince, even though his father was. You know, he could have been this arrogant person and said, hey, well, my grandfather was Saul. I deserve this or I deserve this. But he doesn't do that. And he goes on, he says, and the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, I have given to your master's son all that belonged to Saul and to all his house. You therefore and your sons and your servants shall work the land for him. He can't do it, so he's going to give him people to do it for him. This is going to allow Mephibosheth to have an inheritance. You see that too, that spiritual side of that too? We have an inheritance if we're at the king's table. All right, he goes, and you shall bring in the harvest that your master's son may have food to eat. But Mephibosheth, your master's son, shall eat bread at my table always. He's welcome here. He's at my table, but he's going to get these lands and your family and everything's going to work for him. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. They must be going to work a lot with that many, 15 sons. Then Ziba said to the king, according to all that my lord the king has commanded his servants, so will your servant do. As for Mephibosheth, said the king, he shall eat at my table like one of the king's sons. It's pretty much adoption, right? It's the same for us. We come to the king's table and we are humble and we submit ourselves. We're considered children of God. He says, Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah, and all who dwelt in the house of Ziba were servants of Mephibosheth. So Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, for he ate continually at the king's table, and he was lame on both of his feet. So he continued to live in Jerusalem while other people worked his land or whatnot. To battle. Now I'm going to pause just for a second. When kings go out to battle, it's hard to battle in the wintertime, ain't it? If you've ever studied like even just American history and the Revolutionary War and Civil War and things like that, there was a lot of people who died when there was war in winter, just because it's cold, you can't get food, all that stuff. So it makes sense that they go out to war in the spring. So it happened in the spring of the year, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the people of Ammon and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem. Here's the thing. He ain't where he's supposed to be. If kings go out to battle, why is he at home? He's not supposed to be. Now, if you remember all the way, we've gone through a lot of battles. Now, we've skipped some because we couldn't go through every single one. But David will pray and he'll say, Lord, should I go up here? Should I go up here? Sometimes God says yes, sometimes God says no, sometimes God says go this way. This time, it doesn't tell us that he prayed. It doesn't tell us that he asked. He's going to send his people and he's going to stay at home. Now, number one, this doesn't sound like David. He's the one who was the man of war. He was going out for Saul before he became king, right? Saul killed his thousands and David killed his 10,000s, and yet he's willing just to let his men go. So that's the first mistake. Wrong place. He's not supposed to be here. Then it happened one evening that David arose from his bed and walked on the roof of the king's house, and from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful to behold. Number two, I don't know why in the world women bathe on the roof. I cannot explain that. You would think they would be behind closed doors, but that is not what happens. So David sees her, and he's going to lust. So David sent and inquired about this woman and said, is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the what? So he knew she was a wife of Uriah the Hittite. So he's not where he's supposed to be. There's a woman bathing on the roof, and to me, she's not where she's supposed to be. And he knows that she's the wife of Uriah. Then David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her, for she was cleansed from her impurity, and she returned to her house. And the woman conceived, so she sent and told David and said, I am with child. Big mess up. This is going to turn into a mess. We all know the story of David and Bathsheba. Then David sent Joab. Now, if you remember, that's his nephew, the one who's like one of the ninjas of the Old Testament, saying, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. And when Uriah had come to him, David asked how Joab was doing, and how the people were doing, and how the war prospered. Y'all get what he's doing? He's beating around the bush to get to what he really wants. And David said to Uriah, go down to your house, wash your feet. I guess, what's the word, inhonorable or not honorable, to go down and partake in something of comfort or anything like that, because all of his men and the rest of Israel are in open fields. They're in war and they're in battle, and he's going to feel guilty. And that he didn't read it. Because in the letter he wrote saying, set Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle and retreat from him that he may be struck down and die. So this didn't work and this didn't work. I've got to cover up my sin some way. So we're just going to have to get rid of Uriah. He's not going to do what I want him to do. So it was while Joab besieged the city that he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew where there were valiant men. Then the men of the city came out. Now that's the valiant men of the enemy. He knows where the valiant men of the enemy are, the toughest ones. The city, they came out and they fought with Joab, and some of the people of the servants of David fell, and Uriah the Hittite died also. I hate this because he is such a good man, an honest man, an honorable man, and he didn't deserve this. Then Joab sent and told David all the things concerning the war, and charged the messenger, saying, when you have finished telling the matters of the war to the king, if it happens that the king's wrath rises, if he gets angry and he says to you, why